Okay guys, hi. Oh man, I can't believe I have to move. I'm here. I got some bummer news yesterday, and it's definitely causing me some anxiety. Basically, I was informed yesterday by my roommate and then the landlord that the landlord is going to lose the house to the bank. Apparently he's been fighting this battle since 2009. Long story short, my housing no longer feels particularly secure, and it really sucks because I was just starting to let my guard down here, and I really like it here. I feel really good here, but it took a while to get to that point because, as you know, when I moved in here just now over a year ago, I moved in to this space and John was living here already. That's life for you. And the crazy thing is, like, I was prepared to move on at least 2 other occasions, maybe 3. Into a place with who? Well, you guessed it, John. Though we never ever got to that point. So we made it to May 1st and John's moved into his new place. And basically, I just start going there all the time. And I was basically at his place every single night, except for like one night a week I would be home. And you know, I have cats, so I felt bad not being here for my cats. I also, you know, missed just being in my home and being able to come back to my home at the end of the day and have my space and do my things, like, you know, how we all have our routines before and after work that make our days flow. And if you're spending all of your time at somebody else's place, that all gets disrupted. And I received absolutely no credit, no thanks, nothing, which I didn't need, but just there was literally no acknowledgement whatsoever at any point in time that I was having to put so much of my own time forward into this relationship, and that I was willing to, but like, because of all the crap that was thrown in my face, you know, I do have, or had, resentment about the fact that it was never even given any consideration that, you know, I automatically just basically give up my life and spend all of my time there. And I wanted to be around him, but, you know, when you're already kind of experiencing the beginning throes of walking on eggshells with somebody, you also are realizing, you know, that you there's tension. There's like a subtle tension that's kind of always under the surface, and you start self-regulating your behavior so that you don't upset them, or you're less likely to do or say something that upsets them, because, you know, the littlest thing can set them off. And it was clear to me that, like, there was some bubbling under the surface resentments about me coming back here to live my life, to sleep at night, whatever, where his ex-best friend and my roommate was. Okay, and where he was kicked out of, you know, so he had hurt ego puppy dog feelings over his removal from this place, and the fact that I was still here, and the fact that I still wanted to be here. He did not let onto this in early May when he first moved into his place. This emerged to me over time, and actually it didn't fully 110% come out to the degree that he was harboring negative feelings about it until like October. Okay, so that's like a really long time. But all the way back in May, early May, he would say things like, you know, he would say, you have a great place there, you know, you have a nice place to be, you've got Denny, you've got Ryan, you've got people, you know, and he would say it in like a really nice way. But it was like, huh? Like, because after he would discard and yell at me at other times, he would kind of say these same things, but in a harsher, more like condescending way. Anyway, so they're like, no, you have a really nice place, go home, enjoy, you know, have some time to yourself. He didn't really feel that way though. He was definitely jealous, angry, upset, felt slighted, you name it. Betrayed, that's the word he used, betrayed. He felt betrayed by me, by our roommate, by the landlord, betrayed by this place. So I'm spending all my time over there and we're getting him set up. Not too many days go by, you know, a week. I think it was like May 6th. God, I don't really remember. But it was early May, very early May, that I was flying. I think it was like May 6th. I was flying to Texas, and I had another vehicle there, and then I was driving back one day. So it was 3 or 4 days total. I think it was 4 days total that I took off. And I ended up doing this real quick turnaround trip where I flew there, got the car, did some packing, you know, basically had a full day there, and turned around and drove back. And in this time frame, like, I didn't even get down to my terminal for my flight when I received the first text message. I think it was a text message of apprehension coming from John. Like, at first he was all, you know, have a great trip, you know, have fun time with your mom, everything's going to be great. And I was literally going down there to get this car, to bring things with me that I didn't get to move, and to help my mom with some chores that she had. So I was like gonna mow the lawn, and just basically I was gonna be busy straight on through while I was there, doing these things that were not particularly fun but needed to be done. And so I get this text message from him at the airport here in New Mexico that he's, you know, it was just an obvious. I don't have those text messages anymore. I actually did look in my iCloud this past week, and I didn't have text messages turned on as something to save, I guess, because I thought, like, wow, with the amount of text messages you get, like, who wants to take up all of that space in iCloud with text messages, right? So I didn't have that feature turned on. So none of my messages from John are saved, which is probably a good thing, because I've deleted him multiple times over the last year. So whatever chain of messages is in there currently is very short. Let's very short. So anyway, I could tell you this much. I called him because the text message was alarming enough that I was like, oh crap, he's, you know, gonna lose it right as I'm leaving, and what am I supposed to do? So I called him, try and calm him down, try and talk him down, you know, reassure him over and over again that I love him and that I'm incredibly devoted to him and attracted to him in every way, shape, and form, and I don't want to be with anybody else, and I have a focus that is, you know, focused on a task that I have to complete, so that I'm not going anywhere to be with anybody else, nothing like that. And he wasn't like pointing a finger in that sense at that point yet. It became more obvious to me as time passed that he did think I was always sleeping with other people, but at this point he wasn't using that explicitly yet. At this point, I just saw him as somebody who needed extra reassurance. I'm a very highly sensitive person, emotionally in tune person. I thought to myself, wow, like, I am a good candidate to give him this, because I can give him this pretty easily. As long as, you know, he listens and he accepts it and we continue to move forward, then I can give him that extra reassurance. Not a problem. And I can understand, like, the circumstances of where it comes from, where his need comes from. And at that point, it was still pretty, like, gentle. Like, okay, yeah, you know, I just had this bad background and bad childhood, and so this and okay, you know? Like, we could talk about that. He wouldn't talk about what was bad. He didn't talk about abuse that he actually faced. And then he would try and say that things were good when he was growing up at times too. So I never really got a full clear picture, but I know he did not have the kind of parents, support, childhood, love, security, guidance that I had. I know that his attachments are insecure attachments, and there was a lot of bad stuff involved, you know, in his upbringing. So anyway, I was super empathetic and compassionate to that the whole time we were together, but extremely empathetic and compassionate in the beginning toward those things, because I wasn't being abused too badly or regularly, right? At this point, there were just some weird, odd things here and there, like there was the bad episode that we had right before he got kicked out here, but it still wasn't like super targeted at me. I wasn't being name called and ridiculed and abused at this point. You know, I wasn't being emotionally abused and psychologically abused. I didn't have this deep connection, trauma bonds with my abuser yet, you know, but things were definitely starting to shift and shape, right? So we get through the couple of days in Texas, with me in Texas, and I literally remember driving across the state and, you know, sending him periodic texts. Actually, I remember I sent him some text messages because I had gotten up and left, you know, pretty early in the morning. Not too early, but I had been up since pretty early and packing and getting ready to go. And it was like maybe 11 or close to 11 in the morning when I had finally heard from him. So at first I was a little bit concerned after a couple hours passed that I didn't hear back from him. But then he finally did get in contact with me. But I remember thinking like, oh no, he's really, you know, lost in his head and his thoughts and feelings and whatever. But then he called me and I was driving and it was like, you know, fine, okay. So I make it back here and I've got the cats with me because they didn't come with me originally in January. So when I went back in May to get the other car, I also got my 2 cats. So when I got back here, I had been driving, you know, 12, 13 hours, whatever, and it had been a long day, obviously, and I called him, like, when I got here, and was kind of just, like, you know, chatting with him about how the cats were coming out and getting used to the new place and whatever, and he seemed pretty fine. So I obviously didn't see him that night, but I can definitely tell you that, like, part of me felt compelled to go see him, even though, like, that would have been utterly ridiculous for me to then leave my cats here in a place they didn't know and then go to my boyfriend's house after just driving 13 hours. You know, that would have been, like, so stupid. But at that point in the relationship, he wasn't like abusive enough that I felt that compelled to do that or anything like that. So that didn't happen, which was good. So I went to bed that night, and then the next day we got together. And I don't remember if it was that next day that we were together and then I slept over there that night, or if we had like 2 nights like that. But I think it was only one. If I remember correctly, because I didn't have like a ton of time before I had to go back to work. So I would have had one more day and night, and then I would have gone back to work the following morning. Yeah, so we got to spend the day together and all that good stuff. Of course, I have to go to him because he can't come here. And then that night, I didn't sleep over there because I had to go to work the next morning. And it was like, okay, I'm going back to work. And I did sleep over there many nights when I had to go to work the next morning. But not on this particular night because, I had just gotten back from this trip. I'm returning to work. I have 2 cats now at the house, and they've only had 1 night there so far, and we just had a nice day together, and so there shouldn't be any problem with me going home. And I know that he even encouraged that too, like he would act like, yeah, please, like, go take care of yourself. So I went home that evening. It would have been, like a Saturday or Sunday evening. And actually, I think it was a Sunday evening. Went home and went to bed, and we probably still had plenty of nice text messages back and forth because when I would come home in the evening after being with him, we would always continue to message back and forth until we would go to sleep. And I would always be the first one to go to sleep. And I just thought it was really sweet and nice at first, but I also realized down the road that was part of his need to control, to always check in and know what I was doing, make sure I was responsive, because he would ask me things like, when I would go home at night the next day, he would ask me if I had company. I was so confused at first. The first time he asked me, I was like, well, company? What the hell do you mean company? Like, oh, did you go home and have company? And then, of course, the roommate would always come into the picture too. Like that I came home and then hung out with the roommate and, did things. Oh, so, on this particular occasion, one of the first times I also was asked about, my whereabouts upon leaving here, and if I went straight home, and if I had someone come over. Like, what the hell? Like, I've just got someone waiting on the sidelines. Like, okay, you ready to come over now? And like, I've got all this energy. Like, and like, I'd even want to. Oh my God, none of that ever mattered. So anyway, I wake up at like 5 in the morning, maybe earlier. Actually, I think it was earlier. It was 4 something. And look at my phone. And I have a couple of text messages from John. And, it's a good little paragraph. I don't remember exactly what it said, but I remember the gist of it. My body is actually starting to shake right now with the thought of it, because this was a huge jolt. So basically, his message indicated to me that after I had fallen asleep, I must have, gone home and had company, and this is, not gonna work, blah, 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 for him. Something about respectfully bowing out, and that my things were outside in a bag, and then I could come and get them tomorrow. after work. Well, I'll tell you, I was immediately thrown into action when reading these messages at like 4 something in the morning. And I was extremely upset. Very upset. I mean, I was hysterical, crying, because I had just gone through so much for this man and this relationship, and we were in the beginning of it, and things had finally settled down, and we had got him into his own space, and it was so clear to me, to him, that we were in this together, and how in love with him I was, and infatuated and dedicated, how much I wanted to be with him. And to just be dropped like that for no reason, it was extremely disturbing, upsetting, confusing. And I drove over there at like 5 in the morning. And I went into his room. And I was like shaking. I was shaking and crying. And I was collecting my things. And he wakes up and he's like, "Morgan, what are you doing?" "What do you think I'm doing? Do you not remember the messages you sent me last night?" I was so upset. I was shaking. I think the last episode with him and the first episode were strikingly similar in the way that my nervous system responded to the abuse. I was physiologically really upset. And I could not stop shaking, basically. And I remember him like gesturing to me to come over to the bed so that he could hold me and hug me. And I got into the bed and he's basically, you know, got his arm around me, spooning me and holding me. And telling me something about how it's all going to be all right and I'm going to be fine and I'm going to find somebody great, and if I haven't already found somebody great with the roommate or somebody else or whatever. Like, what? I didn't stay there early that morning. I didn't end up taking my clothes off and staying in the bed with him and making love. He held me like that for a few minutes and then I got up. I saw no reason why this wasn't the end, because who does this? You know, I wasn't used to a merry-go-round. I wasn't used to people that say they want something and then turn around and say they don't want something, and then turn around and say they want something again. So for me, like, if something's done, it's done. And now this was like the 3rd time since we had been initially intimate together where he had done something and cut it off, or did something and then I cut it off, and then he'd come back around again. And it was always this, you know, I'm sorry and I actually really love you and I really want this and I'm scared and XYZ. So that mixed with lots of other things, I mean, I can't even believe how many times we were together, then not together, together, then not together. Because, like, what, we got him into his place in early May, like it was late April when we had the incident here, and we were on the outs for a couple of days. Okay, so now with this first big initial discard on his behalf, where, you know, now we're in a full-blown relationship. We're calling each other boyfriend and girlfriend. I'm spending all of my time over there. We've now bonded significantly. I've helped him in many ways. I was completely head over heels in love with this man. You know, our intimacy felt so profound. So I was in it. I was invested. And I told him that. Told him that I was invested in this relationship. So to be just dropped like that, just discarded like that, like it was nothing, I didn't understand like the workings of that yet. I didn't understand that some abusers will come around again and essentially hoover their victims. I'm also going to tell you guys, though, that because of the dynamics of this relationship and the abuse and my own personality and things within me that I was seeking and needing, and obviously had some gaping holes, I was the instigator way too many times after the fact when he would discard me and we would be apart. You know, I would often be the one to initiate contact again. So I don't know, looking back, like if I had not initiated contact again or been so agreeable after the fact of abuse, you know, then I would have put a stop to it very early on. And that's like obvious, but so I remember leaving, you know, that morning with my things, and inevitably, like, some things always get left behind in a panicked rush, right? Excuse me. So I probably had to go to work that day. The electricity just flickered. You know, there we have it. Beginning of May. And we're not together. The rest of May, like, we ended up getting back together, obviously. I had been bringing my cats over there, and there were dogs over there at the residence, and one of my cats, like, flipped out one day, and we were outside with them, and she tried to basically escape, and John grabbed her and held onto her really tightly, and she bit him really deeply in the hand. So at some point, he gets on these antibiotics, and then he's got a really bad, like, cough that won't go away, that had started at the end of April when he was still here and had been lingering into May. And then I ended up with the cough, too. And I actually had that cough when I went to Texas. And then after that initial discard, just the trauma of that situation and the abuse that came along with it, I ended up getting sick. And I'm just having a hard time remembering right now, like, the full timeline of the rest of May, because I remember at some point in May, I went to the urgent care, and like a week later, the cough hadn't gotten better, so I was given antibiotics for bronchitis, bacterial infection. And I know at that point, him and I were together again, and that would have been around like May 25th. Because I remember he went to the pharmacy with me to pick up my prescription, and I think it was something like maybe like a couple days had passed, right? Maybe a week, I don't know. And then, you know, for some reason we're communicating again, little bits of communication, as always how it went. And then he probably asked me to do something for him. Like, you know, he probably needed to run some errand and whatever. And I think it was a day, it may have even been that day that I was getting the prescription, that I wasn't at work because of the sickness. And I remember this one particular day because he came with me to get the prescription, and then he went into a store to grab a few things, and he made a comment that he had forgotten to pay for the gum. This was one of the first instances of stealing, I think, because there were a couple of times where he conveniently forgot to pay for something, and then like a couple, you know, this time I wasn't in the store with him, but other times I was in the store with him. One time it was cat food, and we were doing like self-checkout at Walmart. I was like, oh, we didn't pay for this. I'm like, what do you mean we didn't pay for this? Because he was doing all of the scanning. So after a couple of times of this behavior happening, I started to suspect that he would like randomly steal things. Okay. I feel like that wasn't a super exciting episode. If you want to call it an episode. I'm just like, here. My phone has low battery. Super blobby. I feel kind of depressed. I really don't want to move. The lights are flickering. Okay, so there you have it. The first discard. We haven't even gotten through middle of May, and he's discarded me in the middle of the night over text, and this begins the beginning of him accusing me of sleeping with people I know, people he knows, people I don't know. And the beginnings of his trust issues coming out. Like he's not really effectively hiding these things anymore.